This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, MICHAEL COVEL. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. Before I jump into this podcast today, let me talk about how I pay the bills. I pay the bills by you in the audience hopefully enjoying my work, hopefully using my work to your advantage, finding value, whether that's a book, whether that's my flagship training, which is easily found at trendfollowing.com/products. But let me talk about one book in particular for just a moment. My first book was Trend Following, and it came out over a decade ago. You're talking about somebody who is learning how to write on the fly. But that first book, over 100,000 copies sold all these years later, 2017, the new mega edition of Trend Following is out. Please, please, please. If you already have a copy of Trend Following, the first edition, perhaps even the third or fourth edition, forget it. The fifth edition is twice the material. It's also hardcover. This is the book you put on your shelf that your grandkids pick up decades from now, guaranteed. I think Wiley did a great job on the construction of this book. It's probably, of all the books I've had, and sometimes these publishers won't let you have hardbacks and all that kind of stuff, I am most proud of how this book feels. The content, yes, 100%, but it just feels like a book. And of course, for those of you that don't want to have a book in your hands anymore, the new audiobook version of Trend Following, the 2017 edition, is out 34 hours. Please check the books out. Check my flagship product out. Your support keeps me alive, keeps me going. Now, if I sound a little invigorated today, it's because of my guest. My guest, 71 years young, brings the energy. Dan Pena, high-performance coach. Dan has seen every different type of business that you can imagine. He's had the ups and downs that you can feel. And he also has the great story of, in 1982, having $820 in his pocket, and 8 years later, seeing that turn into over $400 million. What a great story. But the key thing today, at least for me, for Dan, he brings the attitude. It's not necessarily the exact word he says. It's how he says it. You know that Dan is taking action. And all we can hope every day of our lives is to have some inspiration from some of those people that force us to take a little more action. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Dan Pena. So Dan, I have to tell you, I've been doing this podcast for 5 years, over 500 episodes. I've talked to 5 Nobel Prize winners. I've talked to everyone under the sun, many people that you know for sure. You're the first guest, though, that I've been warned in advance. And I don't generally do this on my interviews, but sometimes I do these monologues where my tongue can get a little salty. But you're the first guest I've been warned about political incorrectness and perhaps even some salty language yourself. So my opening shot out of the gate, my opening question, I want you to give me, and I'm going to go back in time after I ask this question and dig into your early life because I want to really start there. But tell me, what today in 2017, why have so many males become pussies?
That's an easy answer, but much more complicated. For the last 2 generations, the snowflake pussies today, their role models were snowflake pussies, and their role models were snowflake pussies. The great generation, or the generation that my father came out of, the World War II generation, They're a dying breed. And I'm ostensibly one of the last of that dying breed because I lived my life as I was taught by my super alpha male father, who didn't have a father. His father died a few months before he was born, who just recently passed away in his early 90s, my dad. And so they don't have any role models. And now political correctness, in my judgment, is a manifestation of lack of self-esteem. Most of the people that are walking the face of the earth that were born in the last 40, 45 years have little or no self-esteem, as evidenced by the snowflakes that are produced. Most people, and when I say most, I don't mean just 50.1%. I mean like 90% of the people, both male and female, but we're talking about males, want to be liked. That is not a requirement for being a high-performance person. Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Henry Ford, Elon Musk, and I can go down the list. Don't give a fuck what you think of them. They just don't. They go dating back to Andrew Carnegie, dating back to, Stalin, Hitler, Attila the Hun, you name it. They didn't care. Today's generation does care very, very much.
Now, the pushback might be there some, and I want to take apart and let you run down the path with the term alpha. But I think some people could immediately, because they are snowflakes, they can immediately hear you say Stalin and Hitler and turn off and say, he's a bad man. I don't want to listen to him.
Yeah, well, that's fine. But Stalin and Hitler in my I have a Hall of Fame, a Hall of Shame, and I have a wall of influencers in my seminar room here at Guthrie Castle. And the influencers is an infinitely larger group of people than my Hall of Fame, and thankfully my Hall of Shame. But on that Hall of influencers are Christ, Buddha, Hitler, Stalin, etc. Because being a high-performance person doesn't mean you're a good guy. Being a high-performance person means that you get shit done. You're trying to be all you can be. And Attila the Hun was trying to be all he could be. Whether you agree with what he did or how he did it, it has nothing to do with being a high-performance person. For example, Donald Trump, who I knew in another lifetime, is an extremely high-performance person. To me, high-performance means they do what they say. They walk their talk all the time. And the challenge that most of the kids have right now is they think reading books is taking action. Reading books is only procrastinating. The way you show yourself to be a high-performance person is by pulling the trigger, metaphorically speaking. Pulling the trigger again and again and again. You can't hit a home run unless you're at the plate swinging.
You bring up Trump, and it's an interesting story, so politically divisive these days. But if one puts aside the politics for a second, and they attempt to be honest with themselves, and they walk into the lobby of Trump Tower, and they say, my God, one man pushed to build this building. How can any honest person not at least be impressed by the ability, the fortitude to get that done?
I agree 100%. Unfortunately, that where we are in history, well, a lot of kids that are, and I call everybody kids because they're old enough to be your grandfather or your father. A lot of kids today have been raised with money's bad, money's dirty, money's the root of all evil, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just not true. Money is what makes the world go around. It's what you do with the money that is meaningful. Bill Gates and Melinda Gates, his lovely wife, have set up their foundation after they made $1 gazillion. So myself included, my wife and I, we have had foundations after we made a lot of money. But goodness comes from money. You can do bad with it. Like the dictator in North Korea, who doesn't spread the money out around. He doesn't believe in the trickle-down effect. Is doing a lot of bad stuff. But you can't judge the world by what a handful of bad people do with their money.
I love that you bringing up the point of Gates, and it makes me think of Buffett. And Buffett has said quite clearly that, look, I wanted to spend my time during my lifetime, my prime years, building my wealth because I thought I could do that better than anyone else. And then as he got older, past the age of 80, then he got into philanthropy. But he wasn't doing it, on an extended basis before that. He wanted to compound his wealth because he appeared to believe, and he just put his money where his mouth is, he appeared to believe that, look, I can do more with a lot more wealth.
I agree. And he turned a great deal of his wealth over to the Gates Foundation, because in his judgment, and I think he's pretty accurate, the Gates Foundation distributes wealth as good as anybody, if not better.
Yeah, let's go back to something you said a minute ago, because it's another one of these words today that I'm sure, again, some of the snowflakes out there, they might hear it and they immediately pass judgment. But, as an old baseball player, a guy who was a catcher and just having that certain attitude, the alpha. Where the hell is the alpha, Dan? I mean, it's just in the males, it's become this limp-wristed beta stuff. And I'm not talking purely about, for example, someone that makes some sexual choice that's not heterosexual. That's not my point. But I mean, even heterosexual males, they've gone down this beta path that's bizarre to me.
It's been the last at least 20 years, and probably longer. In the middle 80s, where the generation that was blamed for destroying the financial model, which they didn't, but when the roaring 80s, which Trump is not trying to bring back the 80s, but Trump's trying to bring back where economic valuation and economic goals are important. But the kids today, we've made it too easy. They led a bubble wrap life. I use the analogy in my new talk, which is called Wealth, Risk, Reward, Not. The socioeconomic financial model is busted, and it has been busted for a long, long time. All the things that were taught from the greatest generation, you get a job, you work someplace 20, 30, 40 years, maybe you get a gold watch at the end of that. You retire, you have a second home, a ski home or whatever. You put your kids through the best school humanly possible, and so they can hang around with other ostensibly high-performance people, if not only for grades. Is dead. And now the kids are coming out of school with heaps of debt. The schools have turned into. When I was going to university, I went to a school which I had to explain about. But when I went to university, the institutions of higher learning were not a financial model. They weren't money machines. They have now turned into money machines. I mean, Harvard and that type of school has, 8, 10, 15 billion of endowments. So now they're just like a big bureaucratic company. They're like a General Motors. And now the kids have nothing to look for. Most kids that come to me say, and my birthday was just a couple of days ago, and I was inundated with thousands of thank yous, which I'm very appreciative of. But, a good portion of them said, you're the alpha male dad role model we never had. Okay. Well, I also have their parents' age kids come to me and say the exact same thing. You're the alpha male role model dad I never had. And when we get kids, a grandfather or mother, their kid and then their grandkid in the same room, and we've had many of them come to see me, they all look at each other, and the older one agrees, and then the middle one agrees, and then the kid agrees that there's no role model. See, I believe what the kids of today lack, and including your generation, is leadership. There's no leadership anymore, because leadership isn't, will you please do this? Leadership is me getting you to do what you should be doing, not when you want to do it, but when you should do it. And ostensibly, I'm one of the best, if not the best on the planet, getting people to take the risks, make the sacrifices to fulfill their dreams, but they're not easy. I mean, Olympic athletes. Eric Hyde used to be my favorite example. He won 7 or 8 gold medals at the 1980 Winter Olympics. He had 34-inch thighs. Each thigh was 34 inches. He used to practice.
I still remember those thighs. Amazing.
Yeah. He used to practice 8 to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, is that balance? No. People are looking for a balanced life. And as Jack Welch said it more articulately than I, in my judgment, the greatest CEO in the last 50, 60 years, is there are worth life challenges and they have consequences. Consequences are, not going to all your kids' baseball games and not doing a lot of the things that historically we've been led to believe wrongfully, in my judgment. So, I mean, it's not one thing, but it's a series of things that have happened over the last 30, 40, 45 years.
I'm going to go back in 1 second. I want to go back in time to you as a young man, but I want to dig a little bit more and kind of ask you the imaginative type question. You get in front of you a room full of modern day snowflakes. They could be aged 20 to 50. A room full of folks that have been indoctrinated. They've never had a strength-filled alpha, speak to them. Could you, I mean, I know there's a certain percentage you could win over, but are there literally in that population, let's say we put 100 of these random people in front of you. These are people that completely go the beta direction. Could you sway them over with strength? Could they get there? Or are some of them so damaged they can't get out of it?
Anything's possible, but there are some, like the year-long free mentor program that I give. There's only 40 or 50% that make it through the year, and it's for free. Because the strain that I put on them, the stress that I put on them, the accountability that I put on them, they fold up. Only 5% of the kids do I throw out. The 95% of the ones that drop out before the end of the program drop out of their own accord. And I tell people there's no shame in deciding this isn't for you. Being a high-performance person isn't for everybody because they don't equate the sacrifices that you have to make. And once they realize, when you, for example, you play baseball. Now, we just had a former professional baseball player come through about 3 months ago, who was a little guy. He only weighed 165 pounds, and in college he batted .345 or something. And he was a little guy, and he says, I was 50 pounds less in weight than virtually all the other big hitters. I mean, guys that had good batting averages. And I said, well, I knew the answer, but I asked the question, well, how did you differentiate yourself? I says, I worked at least 50% more in the batting cage and the this and the that, lifting weights, yada, yada, yada. And I had virtually no outside life. And then I said, I knew the story, but I said, and what happened? He said, when I got out to the tryouts, first, second, or third game, and he got put in AAA, I think it was, which is leading to, the big leagues. And he said, I blew my arm out. But he understands even more so because he says, I wasn't a gifted athlete. And if you've been in baseball, there are guys that are gifted athletes and there are guys that aren't. He wasn't, but he understood the sacrifice. So when the kids that have excelled at something understand the sacrifice because they didn't get there by accident, just like Eric Hayden.
Okay, let me take you back in time. I've said I'm going to go there. You as a young man, I've seen it in your bio points. You've had a chance to spend a little time in jail. I don't know if this was just kind of an in and out thing for youthful indiscretions, but take me back to that point in time. You wouldn't put it in your bio. You wouldn't talk about it if it wasn't important to you. You got something out of the experience of going to jail.
Yeah, well, I've been in jail 5 times and I've met 5 presidents. This is the analogy that I give. These aren't stories. These are true. The jail times were all involved great quantities of alcohol and doing crazy.
Well, at least you were having fun.
Yeah, crazy stuff. But I mean, until you've been there and seen and heard the door slam shut, I mean, you can watch all the goddamn movies you want. But until that's happened to you, you have no idea what it feels like. And now, admittedly, by the time the 4th and 5th time I got arrested, I was older, though. I mean, I wasn't as terrified from the door slamming. I was older, so I was more mature the 4th and 5th time that I got arrested. I realized this has goddamn consequences. The first time I got arrested, I was 17. You think you're invincible. There are no consequences. I'll get around this. But by the time you're older, 10 years older, you realize we have choices and they've got consequences. And so it is important. But we've had people here, convicted murderers. We've had here people, convicted terrorists. Okay, that did his time, and he's turned his life around. And we've had people here that have, done real hard time. My time wasn't real hard. I just, I got arrested maybe a few days and then I got released. Everybody has everybody should have the ability to have a second chance. But there's a lot of places in life. If you want to go to work for General Motors, there are not too many convicted felons that work for GM, if any. I can't speak to Google or the new modern day Snowflake companies, but I can tell you the old bricks and mortar, it's still got a heavy weight. Now, nobody asked me because I've been ostensibly so successful now that, now they're just saying I was eccentric even when I was a kid. But my dad only had one goal for me in life. It wasn't to get out of school. It wasn't to get good grades. It wasn't to be rich or have a family. My dad's only goal was to keep me alive until I reached the age of reason. He didn't know if that was 20, 30, 40, or ever. As it turned out, it wound up, although I was ostensibly from a money point of view, making money, successful in my 20s, but I really didn't mature as a man until I got into my 30s. And the rest is more or less history. But the pivotal day for me was June 1st, 1967, 50 years ago. I was consecrated by the United States Congress in their infinite wisdom to be an officer and a gentleman. And that was the first high performance thing I ever did. And I become a young second lieutenant. The rest is history. I took it seriously. It's the only thing I ever did that was worth a damn. I mean, I had only gotten in trouble before that.
You know, Dan, the bullet point in your bio, and it's amazing this is a bullet point because you and I know we could talk for days about how this happened, but the bullet point is $820 in your pocket 8 years later, $445 million.
Correct.
The question for you, how much did your mindset change? I'm kind of guessing not a lot, but how much did your mindset change over the course of that 8 years?
Didn't change at all. Didn't change at all. I learned from my military experience that I used to be told going through my officer training, if we were at war, Pena, we'd all be dead. Meaning if I made a mistake, okay? If we were at war, Pena, we'd all be dead. And so laser beam focus is what keeps you alive. And laser beam focus, for those years that I built a dynasty, as they would say here in Britain, my dynasty, and that's in bricks and mortar money. I didn't think, I didn't sleep, I didn't dream about anything else other than building that business. And I used to work 100 hours a week was a slow week. 2 or 3 days with no sleep was not unusual. I was just laser beam focused, and I made myself accountable. I was fortunate enough. I had 3 of the great mentors on the planet. One of which is actually 2 of which were world renowned. The CEO of Onassis Shipping Lines, who was the boyhood friend of Aristotle Onassis for 60 years, and Jim Newman, who was came up with the term comfort zone, and he wrote a great book called Release Your Brakes. But I listened to him, and I did what they said.
For each of them, give me one of the most important ththings from each of them that came to you that became part of your genetic fiber. Okay,
let's start with Costa Gratsos, the Greek, the CEO of Onassis Shipping. What came to me with Costa, it's show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Most of the kids that listen to this have bums for friends.
Literally. I mean, literally, that's true.
Yeah, they'll have bums for friends. Jim Newman, who wrote the world best-selling book, Release Your Brakes, taught me that when I learned that instead of being the most successful Hispanic in the United States, which supposedly I was many, many years ago, I needed to compete against the Warren Buffetts of the world. In other words, set your bar higher. Life's all about expectations. I mean, you will never exceed your highest expectation. Never. And when kids say, I want to make $1 million or $2 million, I assure you they're never going to make more than $1 million or $2 million. And the third, Jerry Orman, they're all passed away now many years, but Jerry Orman, who was in the energy business, he taught me that you can never underestimate how wrong you can be. With those 3 bits of advice, and those are heavy-duty bits of advice, and I could talk about each one of them for hours, I forged ahead. But the difference is I actually listened to the old guys. I didn't, just play lip service. And today there's mostly lip service. And they all 3 said the same thing. I mean, you got to pull the trigger. You can't hit a home run unless you're at the plate and you're swinging. Just watching them throw aspirins or fastballs by you, I mean, and that's what most people do in life. Most people never get out of the dugout of life, let alone swinging at the plate. And I tell people, I spoke at universities here earlier this year, here in Britain. I said I failed at 22 things last year, which is true. I did, 22. But nobody asked me about the 22 that I failed at. They only asked me about the 4 or 5 that I knocked it out of the park. And so the thing that resonated with me from all 3 of those great guys is that can't be concerned about what people think, what people say about me, and that gets back to political correctness. And I've lived my life that way, But it all started on June 1st, 1967, when in their infamous wisdom, the U.S. government, Congress, made me an officer and a gentleman. I believe with all my heart and soul that you need to be all you can be every day, not just when it's convenient. And that's the problem I have with the current, and although I'm not part of the personal development industry, that's what I have a problem with the personal development guys and gals, because they don't walk their talk. If the people listening to this podcast and all the other podcasts that I've done knew what the industry really was like behind the screen, they would be nauseous. They would be sick.
It's one big credit card processor.
Yes, well, Ted Nicholas got arrested. He's not dead yet. Ted Nicholas, one of the great marketing guys on the planet the last 50 years, who is a QLA devotee, came to my first seminar actually here at the castle, said, Dan, it's $1 billion industry, $1 going around to 1 billion people. And I didn't believe him. I should have believed him, but he was right. I mean, 60% of all the product bought, this is old information, 8 years old. 60% of all the product that's bought for vis-a-vis personal development is never used. 40% is never opened. In other words, they never hit the link to open it. 40%.
It's crazy. Hey, let me dig back on something. You brought up friends. You might say, here you are, you've got all this experience, and you say, hey, you got to pick your friends wisely. Who you surround yourself with is going to become you. I mean, it's you. But I don't think that people instinctively don't know how to do that anymore. They don't know how to draw the line. They don't know how to prune the tree. They don't know how to let people go. Why don't you give some practical perspective on getting rid of the wrong people? Because so many people are brought down by that very, what seems like a small issue, but your friends, if you got a bunch of dipshits around you, it's not going to help you.
Well, it's actually a larger problem than that. The real problem is we attract people that are like us. We feel more comfortable with people like us. And they, in turn, feel comfortable with people like them. And they, in turn, feel comfortable with people taking the same kind of actions that they take. Hence, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Losers attract losers. High-performance people are eagles. They fly alone. They fly above the fray. Eagles in a thunderstorm don't get wet because they're flying above the clouds. And it's extremely difficult to get kids to resonate to it. Now, all my children are in their 30s and successful. They did it differently than I. They all went to great schools, multiple degrees from great schools, etc. When they were like from 9, 10, 11 to 13, 14, 15, the popular phrase used to be, I want to have a life. I need friends. I know you don't need friends, Dad, but I need friends. No. And I tell them, you don't need friends, kids. You want friends. And when you're looking back, my kids had less friends than the most, or the average, I guess you'd say. Of course, they had me at home, and even though I traveled a lot, the kids need friends because they're insecure. I mean, there's virtually, this is an exaggeration, there's little or no self-esteem in the world anymore. There's little or no self-confidence. There's little or no self-assuredness. And because they see, do my parents have self-esteem? Do my parents have self-confidence? I'm just reading through the files for the kids that are coming to the seminar next week. Every single file either has sexually abused at home, dad beat mother, dad beat me, sometimes all three. When they say that the family unit has fallen to shit, they're right. It has fallen to shit. We have a lady PhD from Kenya who is a college professor now that was sex trafficked for 8 years. She was a sex slave. Unbelievable. I mean,
there's an example, Dan. There's an example of somebody that lady you just mentioned, she could very easily, if she wanted to, and society would love her. She'd be on Dr. Phil and Dr. Oz and every pop psychology show she would be on there if she just blamed everybody. She's not happy about it, and I'm sure she did some blaming. But beyond that, she clearly, and I don't know anything about her, and I don't know, the work that you did with her, but clearly she didn't do so much blaming, because ultimately what she did is reach down, grab those bootstraps, and march forward.
Correct. Got out of the victim mode. I tell my kids, I just told my 30-year-old daughter here a couple of weeks ago, something happened to her that wasn't fair, yada, yada, life's not fair, blah, blah, blah. But I've been telling them since they were, adolescents, it's not what happens to you in life that counts. It's how you react to what happens to you in life. And most people fall into the victim mode. Life's not fair. Why did this happen to me? And, I just attended a 2-day funeral. One of my best friends, I only have 3 or 4 friends that I've had 50 years. I see him 2-3 times a year. And his wife passed away. And so we had 1 day of celebration, and 1 day we went to bury her at sea. There's something very finite about throwing ashes, and then the boat circles around, and then the rose petals and the ashes go like circle and circle, like when you flush a toilet, and then pretty soon they disappear under the water. And when I saw the remnants of her family that were there and how she had a son that went to West Point, and she had done a good job. But at the same token, she had a daughter that had, was a drug abuser most of her life. And so I'm sure she treated both kids the same. But, life is a 50-50 proposition. And the West Point kid decided that the glass was half full. The other kid, obviously, in my judgment, decided the glass was half empty. But I can't emphasize, even though I don't believe in elitism, but I had the privilege of speaking at Oxford last year. And that's how my college talks developed when they asked me to speak at Oxford last year. You can't help but walk around those 30 they don't call them campuses, colleges, and not feel elite. It's like you're in the Twilight Zone. I mean, everything's manicured, everything is antique. Some of the things date back 1,000 years. Wealthy people got it right for 500, 600, 700, 800 years. You put your kids with other kids that are looking for the same thing in life, which is success. There's a higher probability they're going to be successful. That doesn't mean there isn't drugs. That doesn't mean they're going to have not have problems. And that's why people have been sending people to great schools for centuries. And that's where the Ivy League schools come into, which I didn't go to, but the Ivy League schools and the better schools around the planet. But unfortunately, they've gotten a bad rap because it takes money, connections, prestige to get in those schools now, not just being smart. But they had it right. I mean, you go to Oxford, there's a high probability you're going to be successful. Much higher than if you go to ABC Junior College.
You speak to the fact that your family members, some of them came across the border into America illegally. You grew up. My
mother and grandmother swam across the Rio Grande River in 1924, were illegal aliens.
Okay, and you grew up in a ghetto in L.A. Now, on other shows, not all, but on other podcasts, I'm sure some hosts could hear that information and immediately go into the benefits of diversity and whatnot. When I listen to your story, yes, it's look, my father's family came from Lithuania in the early 1900s, okay? Yes, that's interesting. But the only thing to judge you on is your merit. What do you do? What do you achieve? What actions do you take? What steps do you take? How do you think? How do you reason? Give me your view on this current, and it's also, I guess, a part of the snowflake world. But this idea that instead of me judging you on how you think and you act, I should first judge you on your ethnicity, your color, your religion, your sex, your gender, all this other stuff. People seemingly don't care about reason anymore.
Again, you're back to, and you're describing what I call, generally speaking, the political correctness syndrome. It doesn't matter that my mother and my grandmother swam across the Rio Grande River. It doesn't matter that I spent my formative years in grammar school, actually, in the barrio. What matters is that I took that information and I formulated, unfortunately not early in my life, but later in my life, into a plan that I didn't want to be part of that. I wanted to be part of something greater or better. And I'm using words now that I didn't use back then. I knew that I just didn't want that. I didn't know exactly why when I was an adolescent, teenager. Now, it does matter to a lot of people, not to me. And you see it a lot in politics that, all this stuff should matter. We should have a ethnic grouping, so to speak, that we have so many of this, so many of that, so many of these. I believe affirmative action, which is where you're giving people that come from those ethnic groups that are seemingly deprived more. You give them benefits that that the other people can't get. They're given edges and getting into higher institutions of higher learning. I think that's all wrong, and I've been against it forever. And it's one of the reasons, as a Hispanic, which I am, the rest of my Hispanic brothers and sisters have a problem with me. Now, when I was growing up in my early years of my success, they said, because I'm a light-skinned, blue-eyed Mexican, that I was able to be more successful because people they weren't prejudiced by me, or against me, I should say. And I said, that's a load of shit. If somebody had done something to me vis-a-vis prejudice, I missed it. I don't know what it was, other than when I was in the military. They used to say, Pena, you're the sorriest excuse we have for a soldier in this man's army. And they were teasing about, are you here legally? Back in that day, but that was back in the 60s. Of course, now, fast forward to 2017, if you talk like that, you get in trouble at the very least. It's on iPhone, then YouTube, and you may go to jail. I believe that a lot of the creative juices of the ostensibly the more strong leaders that we have in the United States and around the world are stifled because they're afraid. I know guys that will not go up an elevator by themselves with a woman. They won't go up an elevator because they're afraid that what that person might say. And 99.99% of the time would be untrue. That's a hell of a place, that the world's in.
If that male is at a point in life and society in terms of wealth and whatnot, with so much on the line, and if he can look out there in today's 24/7 media vortex, you're right, it's not worth the risk.
Yeah, you're right. I couldn't agree more. But that's a sad commentary. Jesus. Where have we come? I say, the Romans had their run, the Greeks had their run, and several other civilizations have had their run since we've been around as Homo sapiens, more or less 140,000 years. On the planet, it's about 14 billion years old. I believe that the current race is going to have its run. I may not live long enough to see it, but I just had my first grandchild, a granddaughter, about a year ago. I believe she'll see it. And I'm not talking about the robots taking over and all that stuff that people are complaining about. It's every generation doesn't seem to learn too much from the previous generation. We're making some of the, a lot of the same mistakes the Romans made, the Greeks made, and they were making them 2,000-3,000 years ago.
Dan, you've kind of hinted at this over the course of this conversation, but I see in modern life today, one of the reasons that so many people can't take action, there almost is this mind virus of worry. People worry about this. They worry about that. They worry. They literally sit in their damn house and worry 24/7. Yes, I can hear what you say, and you're like, hey, take action. But some folks have literally put themselves into a zombie-like psychosis of worry, haven't they?
Yes. But we can't help everybody. That's one of the things I have a problem with the Snowflakes. They want to save the world, that's fine. They don't want to make any money to save the world. Okay, that's fine. But everybody, in my judgment, doesn't want to be helped. And a lot of people can't be helped. I tell the kids, if I get down in the hole with you, I can't pull you out. People ask me, why are you so hard? Why is there such a high dropout rate? Or why do you use such harsh language? Why are you're so unforgiving? And I say, because that's fucking life. My world of high performance people that I've been privileged to be around are all hard asses. There's not a one of them. I mean, they're all hard. And even though these guys that run the tech companies, and you'll see like an Uber and who gets thrown out for being a hard ass, behind the scenes, they're all hard asses. But their public persona, their on TV face is different. My on TV face is exactly the same. I've been turned down by some of the great universities on this planet. They ask me to speak. Then it gets up to the board of directors, and somebody does the research, and they hear me say "fuck." Then I get a letter. I get a letter that's saying we've decided that Mr. Pena is not a fit for what the school stands for, yada yada yada, which I find amusing. But they, instead of doing their homework first, because I speak all over the world for nothing. I go there on my own money. I don't want to get any money. 2/3 of my time is not pro bono. They want change, they say. One of the great phrases in the last 15 years or so, or 20 years, is change agent. They want change, but they only want change that conforms to their definition. And that's not change. That's just more of the same.
Dan, years back, I had a chance to sit down with one of the most successful fund managers in the world. He still is, managing, tens of billions of dollars. And we sat down in his private office, and for an hour and a half, I had the recorder on. It was an interview. For an hour and a half, he just dropped every F-bomb, every fuck this, fuck that. And he wasn't being, it was just talking. He was just talking. Yep. But I don't think a lot of people don't get behind the scenes. High achievers, and I've seen Nassim Taleb talk about this, but high achievers, they're not necessarily worried. They're not worried about all this kind of nonsense. It's like, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm saying. It's emphatic. And that's one of those emphatic words.
Yeah, well, they do it to add emphasis. That's for sure. I used to have a best friend that was a priest, a Carmelite priest, Father John, God rest his soul. We'd be out playing golf and he'd say bad words. And then there'd be a good looking girl walk by. And he says, I'm going to have add to my penance tonight. I go, why, Father John? Because I had evil thoughts about that woman over there. I mentor priests today. I mentor nuns today. Now, the nuns, I have to give them their due, have never told me that they had evil thoughts. The priests have, though. The priests have.
Listen, Dan, it's been fun chatting with you. Let me get some directions where people can go to check you out. And look, you're all over the internet. I appreciate you taking some time with me today. But where people can go and check you out, find out more about you, and perhaps even, you've mentioned some mentors and some of their books already. But and you've kind of given some criticism of the self, the personal help industry. But are there any books out there that, beyond your mentors that you talked about, any books that you recommend that people dig into? They could be classics, things that, have really inspired you and kept you grounded over the years.
Well, I told you about Release Your Brakes by Jim Newman. I like the E-Myth, the original E-Myth by Gerber, not the E-Myth 2, 3, 4, 5, the first one. Think and Grow Rich, which is a classic by Napoleon Hill. Oh, Tough-Minded Management and Tough-Minded Leadership by Joe Batten, who I had the privilege of being in business with. He was the mentor of Ross Perot.
He was a tough SOB, yeah?
Yes, he was. Yeah, he was. Who Moved the Cheese, which is a short little book, which is, about 80, 100 pages. Those are the basics. Of course, my own book, Your First 100 Million. But all my stuff is free on my site. I don't sell anything. I give it all away free. And I just, on my birthday, we launched my new website to make it more user-friendly. And you can now access it on your mobile very easily, because people would come to me. I went from the most expensive product many years ago to zero. I'll give it away free, to take away the excuses of the kids. I don't know how to do it, and I can't come to your exclusive seminar, which I give a few times a year, which are all fully booked. But but then the excuse was, you have hundreds of pages of free material, Mr. Pena. I don't know where to start.
Start reading.
Yeah, exactly. Start on page 1 and go. Anyway, so we just launched the new website a day or two ago, which is very user friendly, and so far we got a lot of compliments on it. danpena.com, DanPena.com. And we took the suggestions over the last year or so from the kids out there, and we updated the site. And it's, to me, a guy who just turned 72 a couple of days ago, it looks very futuristic and very Star Wars-ish. And so far, the compliments have been pretty overwhelming. But it's all free. All the information is free. 99.999% of all the kids that have benefited from QLA methodology, that's quantum leap advantage methodology that I formulated 24 years ago, I've never met. I would know if they walked into my office. But the differentiation is we've created with guys just like listening to this podcast over $50 billion, quantifiable $50 billion, not bullshit $50 billion. We have statements audited $50 billion, and it's really a lot more, but a lot of kids don't want they want anonymity. They don't want publicity. My wife, who's a chartered accountant, which is like a CPA in America here in Britain, says, because she contends that possibly they're not paying their taxes like they should. That's why they don't want publicity.
God bless them. God bless them.
Yeah. I'm all for paying the least amount of taxes as you can, but I actually pay taxes.
Well, taxes. Apple has all their money quartered off over there in Ireland, right across the sea from you, huh?
Yep, they do. They do that. And so, but danpena.com, and we've got podcasts, and we've got all kinds of stuff. And it also lists the podcast. This pod that I'm doing with you, when you publish it, will be listed on that website under, I believe, interviews. And so we got tons and tons and tons of free information. And I get emails, not daily, but I get many emails weekly that tell me, we just had a kid from Italy who wrote me. He says, it took me 2.5 years to do what you suggest, but I just sold my business that I didn't think was worth anything after making the changes for 10 million euros. And we get a lot of kids that have done that. And so my goal for the rest of my life, until they put dirt on me, and I'm not going to be cremated and thrown in my ashes spread, but they're going to put dirt on me and I'm going to be buried here at Guthrie Castle, is that I want to drag as many of these kids across the goal line as I can before my time is through. Although I'm the best at it, I mean, I grossly underestimated how long it would take to drag kids to do what they don't want to do, to be what they want to be.
Well, Dan, the number one thing I can tell from you, and I'm sure people listening can feel it, it's attitude. In a world where everyone's got an excuse, they blame their conditions, their circumstances, their schools, their parents, they blame everybody. There's all these excuses, they never end. But the attitude, if you've got the right attitude, you can get there. You can absolutely get there. You can make something big happen. And as you say, set the goal higher than you could ever imagine, because you sure as hell, as you say, if you set that goal low, you're going to get it and it's all over.
Correct. You're never going to exceed your highest expectation.
Great stuff today. I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. And if there's anything I can do for you, don't hesitate to call.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.